Can doctors be forced to work in epidemic? That is the question which is sometimes raised. What are their duties and rights as per law in this context? So we shall examine that. Now, this is a circular issued by Municipal Commissioner requiring private doctors to open their private establishments and labs in period of curfew and lockdown. So how far it is valid? And similarly, Minister asking the private doctors to open their establishments in epidemic period, come whatever may, irrespective of anything. This is the letter from Association of Medical Consultants Mumbai to authorities that they are not having protective gears in sufficient quantity. The staff is not willing to come, and there are transport problems also. In Aurangabad, doctors are again clamoring about non-availability of PPEs, N95 masks, safety devices, and the protective gears. Telangana doctors writing the same to the authorities. So, after all, what are their duties and rights in this perspective? Talking of duties under professional regulation and epidemic laws. First, the Professional Regulation 2002 of Indian Medical Council. In clause 211, Regulation 211 is clearly mentioned that no physician shall arbitrarily refuse treatment to a patient. But the refusal is not arbitrary if doctor is having a very clear threat to his life in course of treating the patient. And moreover, if a doctor is not opening his establishment at all and there is no interface between doctor and patient, no demand has been put, then where is the question of refusal? In Regulation 5.2, is mentioned when an epidemic occurs, a physician should not abandon his duty for fear of contracting the disease himself. There is no question of abandonment here because doctors are ready to do their work provided sufficient protective devices are there, and also the fear is not notional or imaginary as is the meaning in this particular sentence. It is for real, substantial, documentable, and provable apprehension at threat of life. If any of these professional regulations are violated, then executive or government cannot go to court for redressal. It has to be complained to MCI. That must be noted. Now, epidemic laws and regulations. First is Indian Epidemic Act 1897. In section 2.1, it is clearly spelled out that it extends to persons, so private doctors can be given instructions, but whatever instructions are given, these are to prevent the outbreak of such diseases and the spread thereof. So if there is instruction to open the establishment, it is not directly linked to preventing the outbreak of the disease. So such an instruction is outside the purview of Indian Epidemic Act, although it is intended to for social good, but it cannot be made under this act or regulations made under this particular act. In Maharashtra COVID regulations, and every state has got such regulations, municipal commissioner may requisition the services of any other person. So any private doctor, services can be requisitioned, but they cannot be asked to open their establishment, work there at their own expense. Yes, their services can be requisitioned by the executive. Similarly, in Section 65 of the Disaster Management Act, there is a power of requisition with the government of resources of a private person that includes a doctor and his services also. But then it has to be compensated also. So in both the acts, we find that expenses borne are to be compensated. It cannot be asked that a private doctor should run his own hospital at his own expense. Now, talking about the rights are important because all around the world there are medical doctors casualties. They are losing lives. They are being harmed. In Italy, 8.3% of the country's health workers got infected up to mid-April, and in the same time, 200 doctors and nurses lost their lives. In UK, in National Health Services lost 100 of its personnel, healthcare personnel, in course of epidemic. Many luminaries and legendary figures of medical profession lost their lives. In India also, we are having one after the other. There are reports that doctors are contracting infection course of their duties and are losing lives. Human right is basic, and doctors are also human. Article 3 of United Nations Declaration of Human Rights 1948, of which India is also signatory, grants right to life, liberty, and personal security. And personal security would mean that they should be given sufficient protective gears in course of their duty. Now, talking about fundamental rights, in Article 21 of our Constitution, there is right to life, and if it is violated by forcing somebody to work under suboptimal conditions and suboptimal safety devices, then one can challenge it by writ petitions in High Court as well as Supreme Court. It is inalienable, inviolable right. So fundamental rights always stand taller than any of the regulations, laws, or bylaws made during the epidemic. And there is a myth that fundamental rights are suspended when there is proclamation of national disaster, as is the case now. But it should be clarified that fundamental rights may be suspended in national emergency as per ordinance of the president if there is any mention of suspension of any particular fundamental right. Otherwise, these remain inviolable. So, in conclusion, one can say none of the epidemic laws and MC regulations 2002 can operate in derogation of fundamental rights. Fundamental rights remain intact and operative even when national disaster has been proclaimed. Nothing in the law and constitution can be interpreted to mean that a private doctor can be forced to run his own hospital at his own expense, although state can requisition both his premises and services for a compensation. But if doctor's fundamental rights are compromised, the doctor must invoke the remedy through writ petition to avoid the ongoing fatalities of medical professionals. Hence, the bottom line is the doctors cannot be forced to work in epidemic in derogation of their fundamental rights. Thank you.